Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Greatness Glory podcast. In this episode of the Greatness Glory podcast, we want to talk about the hot topic of psychedelics because I see a lot of misinformation exist and a lot of people don't have any idea what is the right way to approach psychedelics. So I want to start with giving a short introduction, and in some other podcasts in the future, I'm going to go more in details about this topic. First of all, a disclaimer, I'm not a doctor or any type of medical advisor, and anything that is discussed here, please use them with your own responsibility and always consult with your doctor or a medical expert anytime you want to do something with anything psychoactive or any type of medicine. So let's start with saying that the human nature, the collective consciousness is usually such that there are people who use things in a very specific way by having the right knowledge of using them and right understanding. And those people usually get very good results and minimum side effects from them. Just like if you were to use a medicine, you do it under advice of a doctor to make sure that you don't do anything wrong, you don't use it at the wrong time or wrong dosage, and so on. When we come to the subject of psychedelics, first let's discuss this, that psychedelics are plant medicine which are considered sacred in all of the traditions for many thousands of years. Psychedelics been used in spiritual traditions as well as especially in shamanic traditions for healing and for opening the mind, freeing the mind from being stuck in the cycles of suffering and bringing new perception into the mind. We can say that psychedelics and shamanism is the oldest religion in the world because it comes directly from nature. As long as nature has been there, use of plant medicine, psychedelics for creating healing and opening and changing your perception been there. But when we go and study psychedelic use in all the ancient traditions, the spiritual traditions, we see that they use them in a very specific way under guidance of an expert, usually a shaman, a medicine man. And it's always been said that psychedelics are like a two-edged sword. So anything that is potent, it's also potent in a negative way. So as much as psychedelics are very powerful in creating healing when nothing else might work, or opening your perception to experience subtler dimensions of yourself, or what we call higher levels of consciousness, they can also be harmful when not used in the proper way. Let's consider the example of a real expert, a shaman, who guides a person to use it mostly for healing. Traditionally, in shamanism in South America, for example, in Peru, Brazil, and those areas, even in Mexico, a shaman would usually go under a 12 years of apprenticeship, usually going into jungle, doing enormous amount of fasting, meditation, and practices to purify the body and mind, to use it. As a matter of fact, even a lot of the advanced shamans that are even very ready, very healthy to use the psychedelics don't use it often, or even some masters usually suggest people not to use it unless it is for very specific reason. And we need to understand that psychedelics are not something for entertainment. They are not for casual use, and they are not something to just play with. This is not to scare you. This is just to give you awareness to understand the best way to use some of these sacred substances is to find a qualified shaman, research very well, and then take it, not to just go and say, okay, I'm going to just take this, see what happens. Because sometimes, especially if one person is experiencing a lot of mental emotional imbalances, and especially if somebody is already taking antidepressants and so on, it's really out of question to use them unless it is guided by a real expert. If used correctly, psychedelics have the potential to create tremendous healing by changing your perception, your thinking, and your emotions and energy, and purifying the body, detoxing the body, and really putting you in touch with the subtlest dimension of your being, call it soul or spirit or whatever. One thing that I've seen, people go and use things like mushrooms, magic mushrooms, or things like that, just by getting it from somewhere and using it at home without having a proper guidance. And most of the time, I believe this is wrong, even though some people might not agree with me. But the reason I'm saying this is not to deprive anybody from such a tremendous possibility, but to say, if you are going to do it right. So certain things being discussed a lot, and psychedelics being really investigated both in traditional way and especially recent times in a scientific way on their effects. And we still cannot understand or explain how psychedelics can create such a profound changes in consciousness. And changing consciousness, changing the mind, opening up is actually the most important thing. So when you go back in the history, you see in different cultures, from Egypt to South America to North America to Asia, things like starting from cannabis, ayahuasca, the sacred, very potent psychedelic in South America or Peru, peyote, sacred cactus, or things like San Pedro, and so on. They've been used to create this healing, and usually prescribed by the medicine man in a tribe to help people heal and open up to higher dimensions. So there are two things about them. The number one, a major thing about psychedelics is that when used in the right set and settings, as it's been said, which means in the right environment, which is both physically and energetically conducive, clean, as well as having the right intention, then it can be helpful. Even if somebody decides to go against this advice and use it for themselves, which is okay. Everybody is free to experiment things, but there can be consequences. But if you have the right intention, that you have a noble intention, such as healing, such as transformation, it's not for just having fun. The most horrible thing And I will explain why I say this. The most horrible thing to do is to think that psychedelics is something like a party drug and use it in a crazy environment. And people have done this and have experienced nightmares. Let me give you a few examples from my own background of working with the psychedelics. Since 15, I've been drawn deeply to yogic traditions, things like Kundalini and so on. And it wasn't till over 10 years ago that I first came deeply in touch with psychedelics, even though I had some minor experiences with them before. And I spent many years of apprenticeship with different shamans, actually. And other than that, I have studied a lot. But then, even I had some experiences for myself doing things not in the best way that I can say created some actually trauma in me because the experience was too much. And psychedelics and Kundalini, even though Kundalini is not as easy to mess up as psychedelics are, because psychedelics can intensely awaken your energies and open up things that you're not ready to, but they are both like the two-edged sword, and they both need to be practiced under the guidance of a proper guide, usually a traditional shaman who is expert in this subject. So I have experimented and learned to work with various plant medicines, and they have helped me create very good shifts in my thinking and consciousness, as well as healing, definitely. Things like ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, LSD, peyote, and many more that exist around the world. But from my own experience of working with them for hundreds of times, I can say, first of all, psychedelics are not a shortcut to spirituality or enlightenment. Different people have very different experiences. One person might use something like ayahuasca or magic mushrooms and experiences a tremendous shift. Another person might not even feel anything. It is because everybody's brain and the nervous system is in a level of state of evolution and activity. So if you already practice meditation, if you already practice things like yoga and you keep your body pure by having a right diet, you have a higher chance of having a, let's say, pleasant experience, for the lack of word, and an experience which is in more alignment with healing, with minimum side effects. There are things that some people completely ignore. For example, when you go to the shamanic traditions, you see the concept of something called in South America dieta, or basically the same word diet, which is having a very careful diet, fasting, and so on is very important. But you see, people who go and get something from their friends and then they try it, a lot of time they don't even consider those things other than set and settings, which is your right intention and right environment. A lot of time you need to be careful of your diet when you consume those substances, because when you become very sensitive and when you open up your higher faculties of your mind, then you will see the difference that if you have not been on the right diet, or sometimes you need to fast at least for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours or something like that, depending on what you use. And all those things matter. Since this discussion is not about teaching you how to use psychedelics, I will likely create another episode going on various aspects of psychedelics and Today, I have my friend Kevin again. We want to go over various aspects of this, have a friendly conversation. He also has experiences with the psychedelics, and I believe it has helped him a lot with creating a lot of healings and so on. And I forgot to add this also. A lot of people use something like cannabis, weed, and majority of people don't know that cannabis itself is a psychedelic. It's a different type of psychedelic, but whether it acts as a healer or an aid to your spiritual progress, it all depends on your set and settings, your environment, and your intention and how you use it. There is a huge difference between when you go and smoke or consume something like cannabis and then you go party or you go socialize, and when you use it with respect and sacredness, because by the traditional view and even to large extent scientific view, plants also have consciousness. And Kevin here has a lot of experience also with communicating with plants, and I want to hear more about this subject from him after I'm done with the introduction. But I want to say, a lot of people say, okay, that cannabis is just like makes me high or drunk or something. But for example, cannabis been used for thousands of years in India, especially in the right traditions. Not that everybody that smokes cannabis in India is a shaman or some sort of saint or anything like that. But in the right traditions, it's been used tremendously to create healing and opening your consciousness to healing and change and transformation. And I will suffice to this introduction for now, and let's bring in Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Isaac. Thank you for having me. And what an exciting topic, especially for me as a patient advocate, as someone who suffered from medication resistant depression for many years. And yeah, I have a lot to ask and learn about. So, yeah.
Give me a short introduction about what you learned by working with different plant medicine and what positive things has it done for you, and also have you experienced some negative side effects sometimes by maybe just experimenting with them?
Absolutely. Well, I was a late bloomer. I was never one of those kids that started early. I think I was well in my mid 20s the first time I even tried cannabis. For me, I always approached plant medicine with respect, and as someone who's an expert in regulated industries, I work professionally. I used to work in compliance when it came to cannabis, also psychedelics, but also as a healthcare professional in the hospice field. One of my passions was reducing end of life anxiety because unfortunately I see these trends of physician assisted suicides that are picking up nationally. And a lot of times, as a community liaison working in hospice, when I would sit across a patient who had tremendous anxiety, which is a shame to see, honestly, because it could be a beautiful time. At the end of your life, like you want to, like at least envision yourself feeling safe, comfortable, accomplished. But unfortunately, the reality is due to lack of education, we see a lot of people taking actions such as taking their own life just out of the sheer anxiety of what's happening. And I've found through various methods, non-profits that they specialize in patient advocacy and patient rights, we've been able to help many, many patients at that critical stage, whether it's been cannabis or other means. And you'd be surprised. A lot of times, it's actually the family members of the person who's passing away who needs the medicine. And on the other hand of the spectrum, I've, in the mental health field, like I've seen patients that suffer. I've worked with rehabs, I've worked in detox facilities, and we see a patient that really suffers from addiction. You mentioned, taking psychedelics for entertainment purposes, for fun. I cannot truly fathom that, because the one time it was recommended to me by a trauma specialist. For over 8 years, I was resistant to it, and I spent an exuberant amount of money to actually hire a coach who actually helped me through the process with setting intentions. He was there the whole time, making sure I'm safe and having a positive experience, and then integration. So I think there's definitely um, structure that's needed with it. And my question to you is, the biggest controversy or difference when it comes to people and psychedelics is, should it be done in a controlled environment or out in the open and nature? What is your philosophy? What is your experience? What is your approach? And I know not any one strategy works for everybody, but what do you feel like has worked with members of your community?
Okay, so the question is whether it's right to take these substances in a clinic, for example, or in nature. I can't say it definitely has to be in nature, but people who have used it, I have received feedback from various people that when you do it in the nature, it's a much more pleasant experience. Think about it. Psychedelics are like expert plant medicine spirits from the nature. And when you are in the nature, there is a lot more life force energy and positive energies around you. And just look at it. Like you go to nature, you feel better. You go sit under a tree, you feel better. So how much more important is it that when you go to a psychedelic state where you are very sensitive and you feel a lot of subtle things, to be in a pleasant environment? I guess a clinical setting or something like that, it has its own place. I'm not against it, but I don't agree that doctors looking at these things just like a drug to just treat you in a closed environment and forgetting about the whole importance of those energetic natures of it. And if I want to give a few examples, and there's a lot I can talk about, but let's say when we say shaman trained for 12 years to be able to serve only one medicine, actually, most of the time. And I've been to shamanic circles, authentic shamans that they were trained for like 20 years and they've been serving one specific medicine like peyote, for example. And then when I asked them, they said I cannot serve ayahuasca, even it's that advanced to talk about them. But my objection to a lot of people is that they think all these shamans or gurus or whatever is just not necessary. It's just like they're here to just be an authority and say only we can teach you how to use it, but it's not always the case. Sometimes people have this mindset as a defense to kind of a spiritual religious abuse, but it's not always the case. I think if you do your own research, asking around when you want to go with a shaman or a psychedelic expert, and you see everybody almost had a good experience and they got good result, and based on that, maybe you can make a decision that's a good choice for you. But just to wrap up, yeah, I don't think it's the best way to say, okay, because somebody is a neuroscientist or psychologist and they know some things about mind and physical chemistry of the body, they are fit, even though it's much, much better than just doing it on your own. And where you say doing psychedelics in clinical settings, it's not a lot of things that they do. Maybe these days they do things like ketamine and so on, but I don't think anybody is going to do like something like ayahuasca or things like that in a clinical settings anyways. But just to wrap up, it's not about the physicality of it only. The conclusion is that using psychedelics, and you understand this only with advancing really, using psychedelics is not only about the physical aspects of it, like just using some sort of chemical and then experiencing something. It has a lot of more energetic and subtle aspects to it, which again, for people who have not experienced something subtle, energetic, spiritual, it doesn't make sense, but there is a lot more to it. And that's why people who do things like ayahuasca and then experience a lot of things, it's like their conscious mind or conscious mind, which is very limited, a lot of time it cannot even digest it. Well, they sometimes, a lot of people get some breakthroughs, but they can't even explain it because there's a lot more going on. Oh, okay, I forgot to say this. Like, it was very interesting for me the first time that I did ayahuasca in a shamanic setting, and I drink this medicine. I sit for meditation. I remember I sat there for like 7, 8 hours from night to the morning. I meditated. It
Wow.
that powerful for me. I didn't move. I was like a Buddha statue. And one interesting thing that happened to me, these shamans, for example, in traditional setting, they use a lot of, let's say, shamanic tools, such as using, let's say, fire, prayers, singing, music, even fragrances, and so on. And there was this shaman guy who has learned to guide you internally, what they call a spirit board, to help you stay on the right path in your psychedelic trip. And every time this guy started singing things that they call ikaru, or the songs that the plants teach them so they can use for healing, my whole experience would shift in a way that is not explainable. It's like this guy started singing this ikaru. I went to the whole different dimension. So can a doctor in a clinical setting do that? No. Is there a shaman who is doctor also? I don't know. But I think we need to respect the tradition where these things come from and stop emphasizing on our limited opinions and say, I don't want to put this guy on a pedestal. I can do it myself. And you see, again, I mentioned this many times. Ego is a very dangerous thing. If I have false confidence that, no, it's a very simple thing. Everybody can do it. Let me just go buy it from the drug dealer and just use it for myself. And maybe you don't get a bad experience or anything, but there's always a risk. And the worst thing is not always to not get a good experience or not get healed, but the worst thing could be somebody even getting worse. So you were saying something about your experience and how these things have helped you. Can you explain a little bit more about it so other people can also learn from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all have had experiences, especially being, not experienced and not having the right guidance. I remember my first experience with cannabis was overseas, and I bought a cookie not knowing there was cannabis in it, and it had a high dosage of cannabis, and I had no idea what's going on. I thought I'm like actively dying. Fast forward to working with it professionally, getting actually a license in various areas as a practitioner. And I'm not practicing and I'm not an expert in psychedelics. I'm just talking out of my own experience. I've come across patients that did higher dosages of mushrooms, let's say, and were not able to communicate for a year even after the experience. So when you say without the guidance and the proper education, it can be traumatic, that's very true. Thankfully, I haven't had that experience, although for many years I was told that I need to consider mushrooms to really heal from complex PTSD. That medication was not really working on, or I was not getting the results after decades of being on medications. I did that through a coach who was certified to do it, and he set up two sessions where we were setting intentions. And to me, by the way, the answer to the question whether a controlled environment or outdoors, it depends on the intention. In my case, I was dealing with severe chronic pain, and we chose to be in a controlled environment because it was easier for him to control the music, the temperature, the lighting, and every little thing, because you're uber sensitive during the trip. And what I liked about my experience was that going through a coach, investing with somebody who was highly experienced, I was able to get a lot, like maybe like decades of therapy, because I had three integration sessions where I would sit with him for an hour every week for 3 weeks, trying to process what I saw, what I learned, and trying to integrate that to make changes in my life. And that's when the real healing happened. And having worked with ketamine clinics, unfortunately we see a lot of use of synthetic psychedelics. I don't know how people do it to party. However, if used in the right dosages, and I wanted to ask you about dosages, because we're bringing up intention, integration, the environment, coaching. um, One of your favorite quotes, or my favorite quotes from your book, The Art of Balance, is something like, anything in excess could be poison, whereas with the right amount could be medicine. And I think when it comes to psychedelics, that's the one area you don't want to make a mistake. Otherwise, you could cause more trouble. And as a healthcare professional, I see that all the time.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the dosage, first thing that I want to go back to again is that you need an expert guidance because you don't know
Yes.
how to use it yourself. But if you are going to use it yourself, then always start from the lowest dosage because it's better to not have a psychedelic experience than having an experience that you cannot handle. And again, this happened to me, this happened to you, this has happened to many people that they experienced the PTSD for months, maybe years after that. Psychedelic experiences are as real as real life experiences. So always start from the lowest dosage, even lower than what people might suggest to you. And you can always increase the dosage, but you cannot do something about taking a high dosage and then having a very intense experience that you're not ready for it. And this is the same thing again. I'm saying this is your nervous system, your energy channels, your brain. Is not for everybody to take a high dosage. And I don't agree with that statement that say, okay, ayahuasca or psychedelics are this and that medicine cannot be harmful. Yes, it can. If it's more than what you can handle and you're not ready for it, it can be actually harmful. So it's not like some people think, oh, ayahuasca only does good things to you. It's not like that. If you are not doing it the right way, anything that you don't do in the right way can do wrong things to you. It's a very obvious thing. It's the book that I wrote, Art of Balance. Even water can damage you if it's too much, let alone some of the most powerful things like psychedelics. But still, some people might argue that no, I had good experiences with them and I don't need a guru to guide me towards it. And again, it's your choice. We are all free to make mistakes in life, but
Yes.
sometimes the mistake might be having consequences that is too much.
Unfortunately, bad experiences and trips even happen in clinical settings. Believe it or not, I've worked with anesthesiologists, as the whole a wave of popularity with ketamine clinics increased, and I know of cases where people had like horrible experiences and got more traumatized with FDA approved medication. And I would ask the anesthesiologist or the practitioner who's administrating the medicine, have you tried it on yourself? And never once they said, yes, I have. And my question is, then how are you administrating? How do you know the dosage? Do you not think there is a correlation between you not having any experience with what you're prescribing, and your patients having horrible experiences in your office, which is completely unnecessary? Because the whole point of having a coach, somebody to be there sober to make sure you're okay, is to create a safe space. And safety and creating a safe space is truly an art. I think that's one of the things that shamans and more experienced people are really good at, because they've been there. But more than that, they have experience with it. So, who you are around, especially when having these experiences, is really critical. Because I know one individual, for instance, that in his 20s, this gentleman had a powerful psychedelic experience, and he was never the same. I mean, he literally was not able to go back to his, day-to-day relationships and living, and unfortunately, currently, is still suffering in his late 70s, unfortunately. So it could be life altering. Let's not kid ourselves. And the answer to where you start from, Isaac, I don't know how your first introduction was, because a lot of people, have a friend or like somebody saying, hey, I know what I'm doing, take a bunch of these. Well, how do one discerns, or how did you make sure you stayed safe, other than and the practices and the people that you knew?
So I am never interested to try anything psychedelic or even something potently spiritual with people that I have not researched in depth to make sure they are authentic. And I always keep my guard, which is my consciousness, up. And I just don't get emotional and do things just because I think somebody is even a shaman or something. So my first experience, thank God, was in a good traditional shamanic setting where the shaman who was trained in Peru served that medicine. I can say even when a shaman is guiding the session, the trip can be intense. Psychedelic is something that shows you your psyche. If we consider heaven and hell to be a part of ourselves, especially hell, you don't want to dive into hell. You don't want to bring a lot of hell out at once by having an intense trip. And I want to say there is a huge misunderstanding for some people with spiritual inclinations as well. And this is a good topic to discuss as well, that they think psychedelics only or working with plant medicine only is a spiritual path. And I'm not saying it's not, but anybody that I have seen that has made significant progress with psychedelics, they are not only doing the psychedelics, they are also doing a lot of spiritual practices. And those psychedelics work as an aid. So going back to tantric Vedic sciences that I like, it's interesting. There is something called Soma in ancient India, which is known to be something that can give you a divine experience when done in the very, very specific way. And Patanjali, the father of yoga, mentions that yes, psychedelics are a possibility for opening the higher consciousness, but he considers it as lowest possibility for this very specific reason, in my opinion, that If you're not putting an effort to make a spiritual progress, you're not regularly meditating and so on, you're not leading a conscious, healthy life, and then you think by taking some psychedelic you're becoming enlightened, you're completely deluding yourself. Because these psychedelics are also called plant allies, because they support you in your journey. If you are on the right path, especially, and you are doing things right, they can be an ally supporting you in the path. But thinking that I'm just gonna pop up this medicine or whatever it is and then it's gonna make me enlightened and take care of everything, I mean, I wish it was that easy. I wish you could take something and then it will clear all of your mental bullshit and all of your traumas and all of your energetic blockages and raise your consciousness and what else. But it's not like that. What other area of the psychedelics do you think that is something that needs more attention or people can go wrong with?
Well, I'm glad you brought the spirituality back into the equation, because I remember one of the things that my coach told me was, if you see a monster chasing you, don't run because you're going to have a bad trip. This is so you do your shadow work. This is so you face your demons. This is so you look at your own self, your psyche, the dark thoughts, and so then you stand and you stir a monster, you stir the monster in the eyes, and then it dissolves. And that's the whole point. For those who are not ready to do the shadow work, to look at their dark side and grow, it will always be something fun and superficial, and unfortunately they take higher and higher dosages, and and they never get there, and then it becomes this competition almost to have that first initial experience. And I feel like that could be a gateway to addiction. I did the one dosage years ago and didn't really need to go back to experience that level of intensity. I want to say, in a way, I'm still integrating from that one session because it was so positive. I felt so safe, where I felt like I had compassion for a lot of people that I was angry at. And so, forgiveness to me goes hand in hand with psychedelics. If you're ready for that level of healing, where you're basically letting go of all those ancestral traumas that are based in fear, shame, and guilt. So creating an environment with friends, with people you trust, where you could, even speak up during the trip or process and write, and not feel judged, I think is a very critical part of the experience. And it is all about the experience, after all. It's not about who can consume the higher dosage and survive. It's truly about the inner journey. So to me, I agree with you, combined with rituals, bringing sacredness, whatever that means to you, into the experience, you could really grow. And I think it's a shame that most people just see that something fun and entertaining, because it does have amazing healing properties. I've seen patients on their deathbed, be open to what's coming, and not fight, and not suffer from pain, and like have a positive experience. Ideally, you have some experience before having it on your deathbed, but it's something that I think needs to be respected and revered and studied.
Thank you. And you brought up a very good, both a spiritual principle as well as a principle for working with psychedelics that I like. And that is the thing that you said, not running. And this is actually, I believe, if it's not the highest principle, it is one of the most important things, both in meditation and psychedelic work, that you need to develop this witness attitude. Ultimately, when you go to that experience and when you go to your underworld, which is your subconscious mind, which is full of shit, and the traumas are coming up and so on, if a monster is coming up, you don't need to fight it. The fight actually makes everything worse. And I had so many experiences with this, where I see a lot of things are coming up and people say, I saw this monster, I saw this thing, I saw this creature. But really, if you ask, for example, Carl Jung or some psychologists, they will tell you these are all part of your own psyche. And even when you go to some spiritual traditions, like you read the Tibetan Book of Death, it's very interesting. And I think it was Timothy Leary, which considered that book as a very important book for working with psychedelics. And in that book, when it's talking about death, and it goes chapter by chapter and says, when somebody dies in the first hour, these creatures come. In the second hour, these creatures come. The second day, these monsters come. These like wrathful deities come. And it keeps repeating one line. Very interesting. It says that don't react, don't be afraid. These are all projection of your own mind. And this is very profound to say, even all these gods and devils and whatever that you see are a projection of your own mind. It's just like your fears exaggerated, especially when you go into that dreamlike state. When you experience things in a more vivid and intense way, a fear of snake that you might have might be surfacing up like a 100 feet anaconda in your dream. And it's all your mind making it up. If you develop that ability to just witness and not react, you will get very good results, both in your spiritual progress and in your psychedelic journeys. That is why it is very important that somebody has a regular practice of meditation and then works with these psychedelics. I mean, even I believe in Sufism. In an ancient time, they used to use a lot of these psychedelic or whatever it was in a secret way. And some people might not agree with me, and this is my own perception and intuition that I state this. But you read the Sufi texts, they keep talking about the wine. And the wine has three meanings. One is the common people's wine. The other one is a spiritual wine, which is like you getting in touch with your beloved, with God, and then you become drunk, which is completely possible because you can become more high and more drunk by the wine than the wine. And the third one is actually they're talking about psychedelics. They're talking about a specific formulations that they had in maybe in ancient Iran and so on to help people open up, just like in ancient India and or other, just about everywhere else. So that's the importance of developing the witness attitude. It's a very important concept in all yogic Buddhist traditions, in any type of meditation, because ultimately your real nature is only the witness. It's not involved in all that play of mind that's going on and the fears and the anger and whatever that comes up. So being a witness means being immune, actually. It means being protected. It means being stable, being happy, blissful. So psychedelics being used, being experimented, researched in last 10, 20 years or more for their tremendous ability to treat a lot of psychological disease where nothing else works. Like, for example, one of many researches that I heard about, I'm not sure if it was done in John Hopkins or somewhere else. Anyways, you can look it up, that they treated about 68%, if I'm not wrong, of the patients who were treatment resistant depressed people. So there are a lot of those data that are out there that shows the tremendous ability of the psychedelics, but it's never the same for everybody. And then again, there is a lot of energetic and subtle aspects to psychedelics than just taking some chemicals. And this is the difference of the ancient systems of medicine and the allopathic medicine. Because if you go into any system of medicine in the ancient world, whether it's Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, shamanic medicine, and anything else, they all believe that the plants have an energy, spirit, they are intelligent. So they just don't treat it like some substance that is going to change some chemistry in your brain.
Thank you, Isaac. And the one thing I wanted to say is, even if you're not into yoga and meditation, maybe just journaling, but adopting that ritual and practice can be very, very helpful in integrating the experience. My question is, do you think like people who experience a psychedelic trip are only hallucinating, or what do you think is actually happening to the individual spiritually, physically, psychologically?
I think it goes back to what you believe. Because if you are a person that doesn't believe anything about a subtle world or spiritual world or metaphysics, yeah, it's okay to consider everything that comes up. Maybe it's a part of your own psyche, but still it has a tremendous medicinal value to be able to go deep down to your subconscious mind and find the root cause of what is bothering you, your traumas, or opening up to thinking more clearly. Well, to answer it honestly, in my opinion and experience, a lot of the things that come up, yes, it's a part of your psyche, just like the example of the Tibetan Book of Death that I brought up. But a percentage of what you experience also, especially if you do it in a very specific way under guidance of a shaman for spiritual upliftment, it can be actually real things or spirits and so on that exist in a subtle world, if you believe in that, which you can interact with. And this needs to be done in a purposeful way. So we were talking about the safety, for example, the setting. One of the things that the shamans do, one of the most important roles of a shaman, now getting into more spiritual topics, is to protect you during the trip and protect the environment, because there are always forces around us that necessarily they're not evil, but they can interfere with you. Just like I'm trying to work here, and then there is a garbage truck going on, or somebody comes knocking at my door and distracts me. Just move that example to the psychedelic trip. If there are beings around us, if there are vibrations and energies, you want to be able to keep yourself in a sacred, positive environment so you can not get distracted in your trip. So that is one of many reasons that I emphasize that you need to do it in the right environment with the right guidance. So some people might have a lot of spiritual capabilities and they have practiced some sort of shamanic tantric practices for years, and to some extent they might be able to create that protection and that positivity around themselves. It's not just about burning some sage. There are forces around us that we don't see. And since I decided to keep this podcast as much as possible in a logical way, and I don't want people to say, what the hell is this guy talking about? Let's suffice to that point. What do you think? Is there any other aspects of psychedelics that, if people use it in the right way, it can bring tremendous healing, for example? And can you tell me about your experience about plants being alive and having energy? And even shamans for thousands of years, they communicate with the plants. They actually talk with the plants. These things for a lot of people might seem like hallucination, but literally there are thousands of recordings of shamans in the forest working with plants, and a plant is calling them and says, I have this effect. If you prepare me in this way and give it to that person that is coming to you for this disease, it can heal him. And you go in South America, you study about them, you will see that a lot of things that they came up with, finding out how to prepare this plant, it cannot be accidental. It's very, very rare that some things can be accidental like this. For example, let's consider the example of the sacred ayahuasca itself, where ayahuasca is a combination of two separate plants that are prepared in a specific way, cooked with each other to create that effect. And in Peru, in Amazon, there are countless plant species, millions, maybe billions of them. How can somebody accidentally just come up with this to say, okay, only if I cut this tree and mix it with this leaf of the other plant, it will produce these effects? The shamans themselves, they believe that they were guided to find those plant medicines. And yes, I know it's too much to take for some people, but it all goes back to being open-minded and studying about these things and experiencing.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. And to me, it amazes me how a lot of pet owners, for instance, believe they do communicate to their pet. And you can see it. Pets do understand, a lot of our energy, whether it's through verbal communication or nonverbal. But it's a belief system that communication with trees and plants is not possible. My connection to trees goes back to when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and my dad had co-founded a huge park, maybe 2-3 acres, and I took it upon myself to take care of this big park. And I would water all these trees, like 2 acres of trees, on daily basis, and sort of started having a connection and affinity to nature and trees, and always question, we cut down these trees to make pencils and paper, like why? There must be a better way. Fast forward to 2021. I'm not under the influence of anything, but I was going through a lot of loss, and I was staying with my brother in Topanga, and he's on sacred land, and there's these two majestic trees that were standing tall next to each other, and I knew there's something special about them. And I was going through a divorce at the time, and I just remembered, like, I hugged one of the trees, and I asked them, said, what is your secret? And I'm getting goosebumps as I tell this story. I'm like, what is your secret? How do you two stand so tall and strong for so long? And mind you, I've been a divorce mediator of 20 years. And when I was going through my own divorce in 2021, it was a natural question to just ask, but it came from such a deep side of me that, to my surprise, as I was holding this tree and asking this question, I heard the word choice. And I'm like, wow, wait a minute. Like, did I just hear or feel something? The word choice? I'm like, it can't be. It said, yes, choice. I rushed to the other tree. I grabbed the other tree. I hugged it and I asked the same question. What is your secret? And it said dignity. Choice and dignity, which is something I'm going to be teaching about and writing about, because their message to me that day was, well, decisions need to be wholesome. And choice and dignity are the two keys in making sure every decision is ethical and in line with the universal laws. And if you think of any time, Isaac, you've been taken advantage of, or you've seen some injustice, whether it was a human rights issue, child issues, elderly abuse case, right? One of the two was removed, either that individual's choice or dignity. And then, as I was meditating and crying, next to them, my brother had thought I've gone mad, but they taught me more, which is topic for another episode. But ever since then, I've made a conscious decision to communicate and revere and respect trees, and they give back so much. I've learned tremendously. They not only ground me every morning. I have to hug at least two, three friends, and we have to learn to coexist with nature. And you mentioned John Hopkins University doing groundbreaking research, Dr. Jordan Peterson, who mentions, psychedelics, post psychedelics. There's a huge degree of openness that happens in most individuals, openness to life, openness to possibilities, openness to self compassion, forgiveness. So there's a lot of countless benefits, but if the true transformation is connecting you to the source, whether it be through animals or plant medicine or trees, it's something to be respected and revered, because I know experts even saying we co-evolve with mushrooms. That as we would gather every night, our ancestors around fire, and they would, you know, hit the drums. Those vibrations stimulated the mycelium in the Amazons, and so we grew, and they are part of our consciousness in a way, given all is one, and it's truly not to be abused. And unfortunately, I think there's too much misinformation out there, but programs and conversations like this hopefully will act as harm reduction measures to make sure people are safe, patients are safe, children are safe. That's why I'm a big advocate of compliance, labeling, education, because without content like this, especially people coming forward sharing their experiences, best practices, unfortunately we have incidents where somebody has the best of intentions, but they may make a mistake with dosage, or be in the wrong environment that doesn't feel safe. I would love to further speak to you about creating safety and a safe space, because that's foundations for healing, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good points you made. I want to end this podcast by actually adding some comments to it. What you said, it amazes me that one time I heard this very famous spiritual teacher and healer. She said that I asked the creator to show me the most enlightened being on earth. And she says that I was taken to a tree and the creator showed me and said, this is the most enlightened being on earth. And I remember from very young age, I don't know why, but I felt like plants are magical. That's the word that I can come up with. When I, even something like as simple as green tea, when I first came in touch with green tea, I know that green tea is also in a way psychedelic, not in the same way that it's mind altering or anything. But to be honest with you, things like green tea, coffee, yerba mate, and those things are also being used in shamanic traditions for healing and psychedelic purposes. And obviously, the biggest example of abuse and misuse is tobacco, because tobacco in shamanic traditions is considered as father of all plants and is so sacred that it cannot be even comprehended. And tobacco is used in all of their ceremonies for healing and protection and invocation and so on. And I want to end by saying, yes, these psychedelics, and I am only a fan of natural plant medicine, not synthetic anything. I don't really like them. These psychedelics are also called plant teachers across traditions, because shamans and people who use them a lot of time believe that it shows you things. It shows you where you need to heal, where you need to change. And that's why people experience and report tremendous shifts working with psychedelics a lot of time, because they teach you, whether it's the spirit of the plant that teaches, or it does something that you connect to your higher self or Jesus or whatever you call it. It's beautiful because It can take you beyond your limited self a little bit and teach you so many things. And one thing that I just forgot to mention previously when I was talking, my first experience when I did ayahuasca, for example, actually not the first experience. First experience after a few years that I took a break, and then I did another one after a few years where I was even more evolved spiritually. At least I think I was evolved more in my meditation and so on. And then I was taken really, really high in my state of consciousness, and I had one notebook and I was just writing. Everything was coming to me, all the things that I wanted to receive and change and work on. And one thing that came to me, again, I'm saying this experience just to share it with people to understand the importance of listening to your body and to the plant and to the guide and whatever. That one thing that came to me, whether you want me to express it and say it was a plant that told me or my higher self, or it was just like my conscience, whatever it is, that okay, you did this today, don't do it for at least next 6 months. And I had already registered for this plant ceremony to go next week. And when you are in a higher state of consciousness, a lot of time you see things very clearly. That's why you need to follow them. That's why when you come back to your normal sense of consciousness, your ego consciousness, you shouldn't say, oh, let me ignore that. You need to take them seriously. And I ignored it. There was a reason. I knew that physically, for whatever other reason, I need to wait another 6 months or 1 year to repeat the process again. But I already paid for this next week's ceremony. Let me go back. And that was one of the biggest mistakes I did in my life. And I had a very bad experience. So the moral of the story is there is a reason people say all those things that I wrote in my book, Art of Balance, the dosage, the timing, and so on. Maybe I needed really 6 months off. Maybe my experience was so intense, so profound that I needed 6 months to integrate it. And integration is a very important part of working with psychedelics. So there's a lot of things. And thank you, Kevin. We discussed so many valuable things. And even though we didn't get into depth of some topics, but I think more and more people need to hear about the right way of taking advantage of this second plant medicines and so on. And they can have a tremendous effect on healing. And my message to everybody is to keep an open mind and find right people, right guides, and ask around, research them, have a little bit of skepticism about it, but also have good expectations, and it can help you if you do it in the right set and settings. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. God bless.
Thank you.